The ill-fated Gallipoli campaign of the First World War would become a tragic example of what can eventuate from overconfident military planning and underestimating your enemy. The mistakes learned from this, the first large-scale amphibious invasion of its kind, would inform the successful Normandy landings 29 years later. Britain's First Lord of the Admiralty, Winston Churchill, was the key architect of the campaign, which aimed to capture the Dardanelles Straits in an effort to create a supply line to Russia and eliminate German ally, Turkey, from the war. Ominously, on the 18th of March 1915, Allied Navy ships attempted to force their way through the Dardanelles Straits, but Turkish mines, forts and artillery were far too strong to penetrate. An amphibious infantry landing would be necessary. 3 major landing places were identified: the Asiatic shore, where French forces would land; Cape Helles on the tip of the peninsula, where the British would land; and an area north, later known as the Anzac sector, where Australian and New Zealand troops would be deployed. Slated for the pre-dawn of the 25th of April 1915, Australian troops were to land north of a point called Gallipoli, capture ridges, and advance over gentle slopes and ravines to the objective of Maltepe, 4.5 kilometres into the interior. At 3:30 a.m, the Australians left the ships offshore and crowded into small rowboats like this, with steamboats towing them towards the peninsula. In what would turn out to be a critical error, the naval officer on the southernmost tow, directing the course, mistook the point of Ari Burnu for Gallipoli and swung the tows northward. As dawn began to break and the shape of the land emerged out of the darkness, the commander of the flotilla exclaimed, "Tell the colonel that the damn fools have taken us too far north." At 4:30 a.m, Turkish sentries stationed on a plateau overlooking what would be later called Anzac Cove were alerted to the approaching covering force and began to fire at the boats. The Australians were under orders not to return fire until daybreak. Now cast off from their tows, some Australians of the 9th, 10th and 11th Infantry Battalions made it ashore around Ari Burnu and the nearby beach, later named North Beach, while others were killed in the water or before leaving the boats. Ditching their heavy packs, the Australian troops made it off the beach and into the steep slopes covered by thick scrub as the Turks shot down on them from the plateau with rifle and machine gun fire. As part of the covering force scaled the plateau, to the north other troops began to negotiate a maze of narrow gullies, ridge spurs, and in some cases sheer cliff faces. Instead of using their bayonets as weapons, some utilised them as climbing picks, dragging themselves aloft by clutching scrub and tree roots while under fire. To the right, more troops had landed and headed inland along the intended route. By the time the Australians had reached the top of what became Pluggy's Plateau above Anzac Cove, the Turks had abandoned the position. The Australians reorganised and advanced over the plateau under Turkish fire from the ridges behind. Behind the Turkish lines, alerts of the landings had reached a young colonel named Mustafa Kemal. While the early reports indicated that the landings at Ari Burnu were possibly a diversion, Kemal wasn't taking any chances, deploying a regiment and an artillery unit to the heights to stop the Australians. As advance groups from the covering force pushed further inland, contact with command to request reinforcements became almost non-existent, and supply lines of ammunition and water became seriously stretched. Miraculously, units from the 11th and 12th Battalions had scaled a ridgeline and climbed a steep gully to meet on a plateau called Russell's Top, from which they advanced across the neck and approached a strategic high point. The hill, known as Baby 700, because it was the smaller of two hills at the elevation of 700 feet, was a vital position to hold as it commanded the approaches to the higher ground. Advance groups, led by Captain Eric Tulloch of the 11th Battalion and Captain Joseph Layla of the 12th, swept the Turkish defenders off Baby 700, Tulloch's men reaching a point behind enemy lines from where the tantalising waters of the Dardanelles could be seen glistening in the morning light. At 9 a.m, New Zealand troops came ashore and advanced inland to meet up with what was left of the covering force. By this time, thousands of troops had landed on the bridgehead. In the heights, Turkish troops retreating from Baby 700 were met by Mustafa Kemal and his reinforcements from the 57th Regiment. Realising the vital importance of the position, Kemal made his famous order: "I don't order you to attack, I order you to die. In the time it takes for us to die, other troops and commanders can come and take our places." Waves of Turkish troops counter-attacked over the hill, pushing the Australians back. The Australians mounted attacks too to retake the position. Baby 700 had become a vicious tug-of-war throughout the day. Ultimately, the Turks held the position and would hold it for the entire campaign. Across the Anzac sector, isolated pockets of Australians and New Zealanders tried to hold advanced positions, but with the lack of reinforcements or ammunition, they either withdrew or were annihilated. Some, their skeletal remains were found years after the end of the conflict. The Anzacs were pushed back across the neck and along the first ridge, but resisted ferocious Turkish counterattacks to drive them off the peninsula. The front line would remain virtually unchanged for the 8-month stalemate of the campaign until the eventual Anzac evacuation. Of the 16,000 Anzac troops landed on the 25th of April 1915, approximately 2,000 became casualties, 900 of them killed. It is estimated that the Turks also suffered 2,000 casualties holding off the Anzac advance. Ending his military career on the rank of Field Marshal, Mustafa Kemal entered politics and became the founding president of the Republic of Turkey in 1923. In 1934, the Turkish Parliament granted him the surname Ataturk, Father of the Turks. That same year, Ataturk wrote a tribute to the Anzacs. "Those heroes that shed their blood and lost their lives, you are now lying in the soil of a friendly country, therefore rest in peace. There is no difference between the Johnnies and the Mehmets, to us where they lie side by side here in this country of ours. You, the mothers, who sent their sons from faraway countries, wipe away your tears. Your sons are now lying in our bosom and are in peace. Having lost their lives on this land, they have become our sons as well."